What up YouTube, it's Misery Company. In today's video, we're going to be making a tier list that is of course subjective, but I have a lot of reasons for everything that I ranked in order because I really want to help you guys make the right decision on the best companion slash familiar to use in that companion slot in Diablo Immortal. Let's get straight to it, guys. And I'm sure this is going to start maybe a little bit of controversy. All right, so first things first, we're going to start with the Dusk Prowler. This is the cat that everyone knows and likes a lot. It provides a shield and it's decent and it's actually pretty good in PvP, not all that great in PvE, as you don't really need a shield a lot of the time unless you're just really trying not to die in PvE, whether it be pushing really hard content such as challenge risks or raids or anything like that. But for the most part, Dusk Prowler belongs in, drumroll, the A tier, because shields are generally very strong in PvP, like I said, and this could be the difference in how you stay alive or how you die in PvP. And then, like I said, in PvE, it's also pretty valuable because, again, if you're pushing higher end content or you're just want to not die, the free shield that pops up pretty frequently is actually really nice for the Dusk Prowler. Now, the only reason that the Dusk Prowler is not in the S tier is actually how the skill works. So because you are shielded and only do damage with the active skill when you are attacked, it makes it a little bit inconsistent when it comes to the passive skills triggering. A lot of passive skills require the active skill to actually do damage in order for them to take effect. For that reason alone, I think it's less efficient rather, than those that I'm going to put in the S tier. Now, like I said, it's a very good choice for most people, but again, it's the inconsistency that you're going to get from the active skills why I am bumping it down to A tier. Now, for the same reason that I bumped down our good old-fashioned kitty cat friend here, I'm actually going to be putting our friend Skitterwhite up to S tier for the same reason I knocked down the cat, because the Skitterwhite, and let's go ahead and put him up there, because the Skitterwhite, the dragon, and the worm, Brood Talon, these two actually do AoE damage on the ground, and that leads to more consistent activation of their passive skills, which makes it a whole lot easier to predict when it's going to happen, which makes it a lot better than something that's less predictable, such as the cat. And the damage is actually pretty consistent and pretty strong. These two by far do the most damage, at least in my opinion. And when it comes to PvP, when you're pushing a lane in particular, especially on the idols, this can actually disrupt an entire enemy team completely by yourself with your pet, which is pretty strong considering that the most benefits you're going to be getting out of pets is going to be pretty minute compared to if you would have applied that platinum or resources to a legendary gem. You get a lot more bang for your buck. But these two in particular are by far the S tier. Now, I wanted to get those out of the way because they are S tier for the same exact reason and are very strong. Now, let's continue our list to the rest of the familiars. All right, so Varog is actually the one that I've been using basically the whole time. So you would think that I'm gonna like put him up here, right? But he's actually not. I'm gonna put Varog at B tier. He has an AoE effect that just shoots beams and it's actually pretty consistent damage. It's consistent damage, but the damage itself is okay at best, but it is consistent. So he deserves a spot on the B tier because he's not quite as good as the cat, which gives you literally the ability of staying alive, or the other ones that I put in the S tier because the damage fall off is pretty significant. But he does have a friend here in the B tier. Now, again, you can't go wrong with Varog. You can actually do very well with Varog. So don't think of this as like B tier as like, oh gosh, he's trash. It's just the other ones above him are that much better. Should these be nerfed by any means, Varog would easily go up to A tier or even S tier. But again, based off everyone above him, he fits very strongly in the B tier, at least in my opinion, but is by far above average. I want to make sure I preface this on that. He has a friend, like I said, in the B column, which is going to be none other than the Storm Lost. Again, he does a little bit more damage, but the damage is a little bit less consistent than the Varog. However, the reason he is least side by side with Varog is the stun that he does. That can be a really huge game breaker in PvP, and for that reason alone, he deserves himself in the above average category, which is in this case B tier. Moving on, we're going to go ahead and put Quaker at the C tier. The reason I'm putting the Quake Strider here is that his damage is so-so, and the frequency at which it happens is also kind of he's just basically average. We're going to call this our average tier. He does do a little bit of CC, but it's not consistent, and it's basically a lesser version of Maw of the Deep, which is in theory very, very good, but it's a much less, it's not as good version of Maw of the Deep. So for that reason, I bumped him down to below average because I would personally prefer to use all the other pets above him. Now, when it comes to Mirren, we're going to go ahead and put him on the slightly below average, but on the D tier. Reason being is that he's actually better, and on paper at least, his skill sounds phenomenal. But the way that it actually works is that it very, very, very rarely ever actually is effective in PvP. Now, in PvE, the damage is actually quite nice. And for that reason, if you were looking at this from a solely PvE standpoint, you could argue bumping him up. But if I were to I'm looking at it from the standpoint of both PvP and PvE and making just a raw tier list for both. That way, this is an all-encompassing tier list, not one focused on either PvE or PvP. But I did want to shout Mirren out for being a little bit better when it comes to damage and consistent damage when it comes to PvE. Pretty solid choice. But again, overall, considering what the other ones do, I think he finds himself on the slightly below average tier on the D list. And then last but not least, last but not least is Ash Sweeper. Again, he has a pretty unique skill, but we're going to go ahead and put him right here in the D section. Now, reason being, because I'm sure this is going to upset a lot of people, it only does damage once. And its damage is good, but it's not consistent damage, and sometimes it can take a long time for its damage to come back. So for that reason alone, I would rather have a more consistent option in both PvE and PvP, because again, while his damage is good, it's less consistent than some of the other ones. But then also in PvP, you're probably never going to hit it. It's very few times that it's going to be able to truly benefit in a way that procs your passive skills. Now, again, I feel pretty good about all of these placements. I'm really curious what you guys think. Ultimately, again, this is not just a PvP or a PvE tier list. This is a more all-encompassing tier list. Again, my sort of draw of the line in the sand is the C tier, where this is like sort of average and then everyone else is above average. So don't look at this and say, wow, everything like B, C, and D are all bad. No. In fact, the average is going to be your Quake Strider, and then everything above that is so much better. That's why they're on those tiers above it. But again, these guys are just slightly worse than everyone else, making them slightly below average. Fortunately, I don't think any of them are straight up bad. I think you can use any familiar in almost any time, but if you want to figure out what is the overall best familiar, this is the tier list for you. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm sure I'm going to get blasted for people disagreeing, but I feel pretty strongly about it, and ultimately it's very subjective. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Try to keep it nice down there. I will respond to any and all comments that are at least constructive in criticism and or productive in conversation development. So until next time, guys, lock it in.